Chapter 16. Professor Trelawney's Prediction. Harry's euphoria at final winning the Quidditch Cup latest at last a week. Even the weather seemed to be celebrating as June approached. The days became cloudless and slutty, and all anybody felt like doing was strolling onto the grounds and flopping down on the grass with several pints of iced pumpkin juice. Perhaps playing a casual game of gobstone or watching the giant squid propel itself dreamily across the surface of the lake. But they couldn't. Exams were nearly upon them, and instead of lazing around outside, the students were forced to remain inside the castle, trying to bully their brains into concentrating while entrancing waft of summer air drifted in through the windows. Even Fred and George Weasley had been spotted working. They were about to take their owl's ordinary wizardian's level. Percy was getting ready to take his nasty, exhausting wizardian test, the highest qualification Hogwarts offered. As Percy hoped to enter the Ministry of Magic, he needed top grades. He was becoming increasingly eager and gave very severe punishment to anybody who disturbed the quiet of the common room in the evening. In fact, the only person who seemed more anxious than Percy was Hermione. Harry and Ron had given up asking her how she was managing to attend several classes at once, but they couldn't restrain themselves when they saw the exam schedule she had drawn up herself. The first column read Monday, 9 o'clock, Artimacy, 9 o'clock, Transfiguration, lunch, 1 o'clock, Charm, 1 o'clock, Ancient Runs. Hermione, Ron said cautiously, because she was liable to explode when erupted these days. Are you sure you have copied down this time right? What? Sniffed Hermione, picking up the exam schedule and examining it. Yes, of course I have. Is there any point asking how you are going to sit for two exams at once? Said Harry. No, said Hermione shortly. Have either of you seen my copy of Nermology and Grammatica? Oh, yeah, I borrowed it for a bit of bedtime reading, said Ron, but very quietly. Hermione started shifting heap of parchment around on her table, looking for the book. Just then, there was a rustle at the window, and Hedwig fluttered through it, a note clutched tight in her beak. It's from Hagrid, said Harry, ripping the note open. Buckbeak's appeal. It said for 6th. That's the day we wishing for finishing our exams, said Hermione, still looking anywhere for her Artemis book, and they are coming up here to do, said Harry, still reading from the letter. Someone from the Ministry of Magic and an executioner. Hermione looked up, startled. They are bringing the executioner to the appeal, but that sounds as though they are already decided. Yeah, it does, said Harry slowly. They can't. Ron hauled. I have spent ages reading up on stuff for him. They can't just ignore it all. But Harry had a horrible feeling that the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures had its mind made up for it by Mr. Malfoy Draco, who had been noticeably subdued since Gryffindor's triumph in the Quidditch final, seemed to regain some of its old swagger over the next few days. From rearing comments, Harry overheard Malfoy was certain Buckbeak was going to be killed and seemed thoroughly pleased with himself for bringing it about. It was all Harry could do to stop himself imitating Hermione and hitting Malfoy in the face on the occasions. And the worst thing of all was that they had no time to opportunity to go and see Hagrid because the strict new security measure had not been lifted, and Harry didn't dare retrieve his invisibility cloak from below the one-eyed witch. Exam week began and an unnatural hush fell over the castle. The third year emerged from Transfiguration at lunch time on Monday, limed and ash-faced, comparing result and bemoaning the difficulty of the task they had been set, which had including turning a teapot into a tortoise. Hermione, irritated and dressed by fussing about how her tortoise had looked more like a turtle, which was the least of everyone else's worries. Mine still had a spot out for a tail. What a nightmare where the tortoise supposed to breathe steam. It still had a willow patterned shell. Do you think that's count against me? Then after a hasty lunch it was straight back upstairs for the charm exam. Hermione had been right. Professor Flitwick did indeed test them on cheering charm. Harry slightly overdid his out of nerves, and Ron, who has patronizing him, ended up in fifth of hysterical laughter and had to be led away to be a quiet room for an hour before he was ready to perform the charm himself. After dinner, the students hurried back to their common room, not to relax but to start buying for care of magical creature potion and astronomy. Hagrid presided over the care of magical creature exam the following morning with a very preoccupied air. Indeed, his heart didn't seem to be in it all. He had provided a large tub of a fresh flower worm for the class and told them that to pass the test, their flower worm had to still be alive at the end of 1 hour. As flower worms flourished best, it lived with their own device. It was the easiest exam any of them had ever taken, and also gave Harry, Ron, and Hermione plenty of opportunity to speak to Hagrid. Becky's getting a bit depressed, Hagrid told them, bending the low on the pretense of checking that Harry Flowerworm was still alive, been cooped up too long, but still will know day after tomorrow. One way or the other, they had potions that afternoon, which was unqualified disaster. Try as Harry might, he couldn't get his confusing concoction to thicken, and Snape, standing watch with an air of vindictive pleasure, scribbled them something that looked suspiciously like a zero on his note before moving away. Then came astronomy at midnight, up on the tallest tower, history of magic on Wednesday morning, in which Harry scribbled everything Florent Fortescue had ever told him about medieval witch hunt, while wishing he could have had one of Fortescue's coconut shade with him in the shifting classroom. Wednesday afternoon meant herbology in the greenhouse under a baking hot sun, then back to the common room once more with sunburnt neck, thinking longingly onto his next day when it would be all over. Their second to last exam on Thursday morning was defense against the dark art. Professor Lupin had complied the most unusual exam any of them had ever taken, a sort of obstacle course outside in the sun, where they had to wade across the deep paddling pool containing a great deal, cross a series of potholes full of red caps, squash their way across a path of marsh while ignoring misleading direction from high ups, then climb into the old trunk and battle with a new bogart. Excellent, Harry, Lupin muttered as Harry climbed out of the trunk, grinning full marks. Flushed with his success, Harry hung around to watch Ron and Hermione. Ron did very well until he reached the hunky pucks, which successfully confused him with sinking waist high into the gungmire. Hermione did everything perfectly until she reached the trunk with the bogart in it. After about a minute inside it, she burst out again screaming. Hermione, said Lupin, starter, what's the matter? Professor McGonagall, Hermione gasped, pointing into the trunk. She said I had felt everything. It took a little while to calm Hermione down. When at last she had regained a grip on herself, she, Harry, and Ron went back to the castle. Ron was still slightly inclined to laugh at Hermione's bogart, but an argument was averted by the sight that made them on the top of the steps. Cornelius Fudge, sweating slightly in his Pinterest clock, was standing here, starting out to the ground. He started at the sight of Harry. Hello there, Harry, he said. Just had an exam, I expect. Nearly finished. Yes, said Harry. Hermione and Ron, not being on speaking terms with the Ministry of Magic, hovered awkwardly in the background. Lovely day, said Flush, casting an eye over the fake pity. He sighed deeply and looked down at Harry. I am here on an unpleasant mission. Harry, the committee for the disposal of dragon creature required a witness to the execution of a mad hippogriff as I needed to visit Hogwarts to check on the black situation. I was asked to step in. Does that mean the appeal already happened? Ron interrupted, stepping forward. No, it's scheduled for this afternoon, said Fudge, looking curiously at Ron. Then you might not have to witness an execution at all, said Ron shoutedly. The hippogriff might get off. Before Fudge could answer, two wizards came through the castle door behind him. One was so ancient he appeared to be withering before their very eye. The other was tall and strapping with a thin black mustache. Harry gathered that they were representative of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures, because the very old wizard squinted toward Hagrid's cabin and said in feeble voice, Dear, I am getting too old for this. 2 o'clock, isn't it, Fuzz? The black mustached man was figuring something in his belt. Harry looked and saw that he was running on broad thumb along the blade of the shiny axe. Ron opened his mouth to say something, but Hermione nudged him hard in the ribs and jerked her head towards the entrance hall. Why had you stopped me? Said Ron angrily as they entered the great hall for lunch. Did you see them? They have even got the axe ready. This isn't justice. Ron, your dad works for the ministry. You can't go saying things like that to his boss, said Hermione. But she too looked very upset. As long as Hagrid keeps his head in times and argues his case properly, they can't possibly execute Buckbeak. But Harry could tell Hermione didn't really believe what she was saying. All around them, people were talking excitedly as they ate their lunch, happier anticipating the end of the exam that afternoon. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione, lost in worry about Hagrid and Buckbeak, didn't join in. Harry's and Ron's last exam was deviation. Hermione's Muggle studies. They walked up the marble staircase together. Hermione left them on the first floor, and Harry and Ron proceeded all the way up to the seventh, where many of their class were sitting on the spiral staircase to Professor Trelawney's classroom, trying to cram in a bit of last-minute study. She is saying us all separately, Neville informed them as they went to sit down next to him. He had his copy of Unfogging the Future open on his lap at the gaps devoted the crystal gazing. Have either of you ever seen anything in the crystal ball? He asked it unhappily. Nope, said Ron in an unoffended voice. He kept checking his watch. Harry knew that he was counting down the time until Buckbeak's appeal started. The line of people outside the classroom shortened very slowly as each person climbed back down the silver ladder. The rest of the class hissed, What did she ask? Was it okay? But they all refused to say. He said the crystal ball told her that if I tell you, I'll have a horrible accident. Squeaked Neville as they clambered back down the ladder toward Harry and Ron, who had now reached the landing. That's convenient, snorted Ron. You know, I am starting to think Hermione was right about her. He jabbed his thumb toward the third row. Oh, head, she's right, old fraud. Yes, said Harry, looking at his own watch. It was now 2 o'clock. Wish she had hurried up. Parvati came back down the ladder, glowing with pride. She says, I have got all the making of the true sneer, she informed Harry and Ron. I saw lots of stuff. Well, good luck. She hurried off down the spiral staircase toward Lavender. Ronald Weasley, said the familiar misty voice from their head. Ron grinned at Harry and climbed the silver ladder out of the sight. Harry was now the only person left to be tested. He settled himself on the floor with his back against the wall, listening to a fly buzzing in the sunny window, his mind across the ground with Hagrid. Finally, after about 20 minutes, Ron's large feet reappeared on the ladder. How did it go? Harry asked him, standing up. Rubbish, said Ron. Couldn't see a thing, so I made some stuff up. Don't think she was convinced, though. Meet you in the common room, Harry muttered as Professor Trelawney's voice called Harry Potter. The whole room was hotter than ever before. The curtains were closed, the fire was alight, and the usual sea scent made Harry cough as she stumbled through the clutter of chairs and tables to where Professor Tranway sat, waiting for him before a large crystal ball. "Good day, my dear," she said softly. "If you will kindly gaze into the orb, take your time now, then tell me what you see within it." Harry bent over the crystal ball and started as hard as he could, willing it to show him something other than swirling white fog, but nothing happened. "Well, Professor Trelawney prompted delicately, what do you see?" The heat was overpowering, and his nostrils were stinging with perfume smoke wafting from the fire beside them. He thought of what Ron had just said and decided to pretend. Said Harry, "A dark shape. What does it resemble?" Sir Professor Trelawney, think now. Harry cast his mind around it and landed on Buckbeak. "A hippogriff," he said firmly. "Indeed," whispered Professor Trelawney, scribbling kneeling on the parchment upon her knees. "My boy, you may well be seeing the outcome of poor Hagrid's trouble with the Ministry of Magic. Look closer. Does the hippogriff appear to have its head?" "Yes," said Harry firmly. "Are you sure, Professor Trenway?" urged him. "Are you quite sure, dear? You don't see it writing on the ground, perhaps, and shadow figure raising an axe behind it?" "No," said Harry, starting to feel slightly sick. "No blood? No whipping, Hagrid?" "No," said Harry again, wanting more than ever to leave the room and the heat. "It looks fine. It's flying away." Professor Tranway sighed. "Well, dear, I think we'll leave it there. A little disappointing, but I'm sure you did your best." Believed. Harry got up, picked up his bag and turned to go, but then a loud, harsh voice spoke behind him. "It will happen tonight." Harry wheeled around. Professor Trenway had gone rigid in her armchair. Her eyes were unfocused and her mouth sagging. "So sorry," said Harry. But Professor Trenway didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes started to roll. Harry sat there in a panic. She looked as though she was about to have some sort of seizure. He hesitated, thinking of running to the hospital wing, and then Professor Trenway spoke again in the same harsh voice, quite unlike her own. "The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant had been claimed these 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, the servant will break free and set out to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord will rise again with his servant's aid, greater and more terrible than ever he was tonight. Before midnight, the servant will set out to rejoin his master." Professor Tranway's head fell forward onto her chest. She made a grunting sort of noise. Harry sat there staring at her. Then, quite sudden, Professor Tranway's head snapped up again. "I'm so sorry, dear boy," she said dreamily. "The heat of the day, you know." I drifted off for a moment. Harry sat there staring at her. "Is there anything wrong, my dear? You just told me that the Dark Lord's going to rise again. That servant's going to go back to him." Professor Trelawney looked thoroughly startled. "The Dark Lord? He who must not be named, my dear boy? That's hardly something to joke about. Rise again, indeed. But you just said it. You said the Dark Lord. I think you must have dozed off too, dear," said Professor Trelawney. "I would certainly not presume to predict anything quite as frightened as that." Harry climbed back down the ladder and the spiral staircase, wondering had he had just heard Professor Trelawney make a real prediction, or had that been her idea of an impressive end to the test. 5 minutes later, he was dashing past the security doors out the entrance to Gryffindor Tower, Professor Trelawney's words still resounding in his head. People were striding past him in the opposite direction. laughing and joking, heading for the ground and a bit of long-awaited freedom. By the time he had reached the portrait hall and entered the common room, it was almost deserted over in the corner. However, Ron sat and Harmony, Professor Trelawney, Harry Patted just told me, but he stopped abruptly at the sign of their faces. Bugby lost, said Ron weakly. Hagrid just sent this. Hagrid's note was dry in the time no tear had splattered it, yet this had seemed to have shaken so much as he wrote that it was hardly like his lost appeal. They are going to execute at sunset. Nothing you can do. Don't come down. I don't want you to see Hagrid. We have got to go, said Harry at once. He can't just sit there on his own, waiting for executioners. Sunset enough, said Ron, who was staring out the window in a sort of way we had never been allowed, especially you, Harry. Harry sank his head into hand, thinking, if we only had the invisibility clock. Where is it? Said Hermione. Harry told her about leaving it in the passageway under the one-eyed witch. If Snape sees me anywhere near there again, I am in serious trouble, he finished. That's true, said Harmony, getting to her feet. If you see you, how do you open the witch hump again? You tap it and say Descendium, said Harry, but Harmony didn't wait for the rest of the sentence. She strode across the room, pushed open the fat lady's portrait, and vanished from the sight. She hasn't gone here to get it, Ron said, staring after her. She had. Hermione returned a quarter of an hour later with a silvery clock followed carefully under her robe. Hermione, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, said Ron, astounded. First you hit Malfoy, then you walked out Professor Trelawney. Hermione looked rather flattered. They went down to dinner with everybody else, but did not return to Gryffindor Tower afterward. Harry had the clock hidden down the front of his robe. He had to keep his arm folded to hide the lump. They stopped in an empty chamber of the entrance hall, listened until they were sure it had then started. They heard a last pair of people hurrying across the hall and a door slamming. Hermione poked her head around the door. Okay, she whispered, no one there, clock on, walking very close together so that nobody could see them. They crossed the hall on tiptoe. Beneath the clock, they walked down the stone front step into the ground. The sun was already sinking behind the forbidden forest, gilding the top branches of the tree. They reached Hagrid's cabin and knocked. He was a minute in answering, and when he did, he looked all around for his visitor, pulsed and trembled. It's yours, Harry hissed. We are wearing an invisibility cloak. Let us in and we can take it off. Yeah, shouldn't have come, Hagrid whispered, but he stood back and they stepped inside. Hagrid shut the door quickly and Harry pulled off the cloak. Hagrid was not crying, nor did he throw himself upon the neck. He looked like a man who did not know where he was or what to do. This helplessness was worse to watch than tears. Want some tea? He said, his great hands were shaking as he reached for the kettle. Where is Buckby Hagrid? Said Hermione hesitantly. I took him outside, said Hagrid, spilling milk all over the table as he filled up the jug. He is tethered in my pumpkin patch. Thought he ought to see the trees and smell fresh air before Hagrid's hand trembled so violently that the milk jug slipped from the grasp, splattered all over the floor. I'll do it, Hagrid. Then Hermione quickly hurried over, starting to clean up the mess. There is another one in the cupboard, Hagrid said, sitting down and wiping his forehead on his sleeves. Harry glanced at Ron, who looked back hopeless. Isn't there anything one can do, Hagrid? Harry asked fiercely, sitting down next to him. Dumbledore, he is tired, said Hagrid. He's got no power to overrule committee. He told them Buckbeak's all right, but they are scattered. You know that Lucius Malfoy like threatened them, I expect. And the executioner mercenary, he is an old pal of Malfoy's, but it will be quick and clean, and I'll be beside him. Hagrid swallowed his eyes were darting all over the cabin, as though looking for some shade of hope or comfort. Dumbledore gone down while it happened, wrote me the morning, said he wants to be with me. Great man, Dumbledore. Hermione, who had been rummaging in Hagrid's cupboard to another milk jug, let out a small, quickly settled file soap. She started off with a new jug in her hand, flighting back tears. We'll stay with you too, Hagrid, she began, but Hagrid shook his shaggy head. You have to go back to the castle. I told you I don't want you watching, and you shouldn't be down here anyway. If Fudge and Dumbledore catch you out without permission, Harry, you'll be in a big trouble. Silent tears were now streaming down Hermione's face, but she hid them from Hagrid bursting around making tea. Then, as she picked up the milk bottle to pour some onto the jug, she let out a shrinking Ron. I don't believe it, it's Scrabble. Ron gaped at her. What are you talking about? Hermione carried the milk jug over to the table and turned it upside down with a frantic squeak and much scrambling to get back inside Scabbard. That rat came sliding over onto the table. Scabbard, said Ron blankly. Scabbard, what are you doing here? He grabbed the struggling rat and held him up to the light. Scabbers looked dreadful. He was thinner than ever. Large tufts of hair was fallen out, leaving white bad patch, and he returned in Ron's hand as though desperate to free himself. It's okay, Scabbard, said Ron. No cats. There is nothing here to hurt you. Hagrid suddenly stood up, his eyes fixed on the window. His normally ready face had gone the color of parchment. They are coming. Harry, Ron and Hermione wiped around. A group of men was walking down the distant castle step in front of Albus Dumbledore, his silver beard gleaming in the dying sun. Next to him, Potter Cornelius Fudge. Behind them came the feeble old committee member and the executioner McNair. You got to go, said Hagrid. Every inch of him was trembling. They mustn't find you are here. Go now. Ron snubbed Scabbard into his pocket and Hermione picked up the cloak. I'll let you out the back away, said Hagrid. They followed him to the door into his back garden. Harry felt strangely unreal and even more so when he saw Buckbeak a few yards away, tethered to a tree behind Hagrid's pumpkin patch. Buckbeak seemed to know something was happening. He turned his sharp head from side to side and pawed the ground nervously. It's okay, Bicky, said Hagrid softly. It's okay. He turned to Harry, Ron and Hermione. Go on, she said. Get going. But they didn't move. Hagrid, we can't. We'll tell them what really happened. They can't kill him. Go, said Hagrid fearlessly. It's bad enough without you lot in trouble and all. They had no choice as Hermione threw the cloak over Harry and Ron. They heard voices in front of the cabin. Hagrid looked at the place where they had just vanished from sight. Go quick, he said hoarsely. Don't listen. And he strode back into his cabin as someone knocked at the front door. Slowly, in the kind of horrified trance, Harry, Ron and Hermione set off silently around Hagrid's house. As they reached the other side, the front door closed with a sharp snap. Please, let's hurry, Hermione whispered. I can't stand it. I can't bear it. They started up the sloping lawn toward the castle. The sun was sinking fast now. The sky had turned to the clear purple tinged grey, but to the west there was a ruby grey glow. Ron stopped dead. Oh, please, Ron, Hermione began. It's Scabbard. He won't stay put. Ron was bent over trying to keep Scabbard in his pocket, but the rat was going brace-stricken, squeaking madly, twisting and flitting, trying to sink his teeth into Ron's hand. Scabbard, it's me, you idiot. It's Ron. Ron is. They heard the door open behind them and men's voice. Oh, Ron, please let's move. They are going to do it. Hermione breathed. Okay, Scabbard, stay put. They walked toward Harry like Hermione was trying not to listen to the rumble of voice behind Ron. Stop again. I can't hold him. Scatter, shut up. Everyone will hear us. The rat was squealing wildly but not loudly enough to cover up the sound drifting from Hagrid's garden. There was a jungle of indistinct male voices, a silence, and then, without warning, the unmistakable swish and thud of the axe. Hermione swayed on the spot. They did it, she whispered to Harry. I had, don't believe it, then did it. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next